Hey everybody. Hey everybody, welcome to Trav Auto Garage. Today, I'm looking back over the past couple of months and maintenance issues that I needed to get done. And one of these was the last time that I was under there changing the oil, I noticed that the shock didn't quite look right. And when I got a flashlight on there, I noticed that the shock bushing was starting to degrade and had some cracking on the rubber. So I wanted to make a video about replacing those bushings and other potential maintenance issues with the shocks that came on the RV. Now, the Jayco motorhome that I have is a Greyhawk 31FS, and it's a bunkhouse model. It's a 2016. Now, the Greyhawk model line for that particular year and some years around it, the J-Ride Plus came with a Bilstein shock absorber. Now, the Ford base part number is of course different from the Bilstein, so it's going to have some different components associated with it. So this video is specific to the Bilstein shock, and I have the part numbers for the bushing that I'm going to be replacing, and they're super easy to get from Summit Racing. So we've got the old bushing and the new bushing side by side, and you can see after I pulled this one out how kind of nasty and cruddy this was as compared to the new bushing. So do you need to actually replace these things? If they get bad enough, yes, you do, because it will cause handling and ride issues. Is this bad enough right now? Not necessarily. It's more of a maintenance thing to me that I can do now because it's really easy and it's really cold outside. So we're going to get into the actual replacement of it, how to take the shock off, how to press the bushing out, how to press the new bushing in, and then putting the shock back in the vehicle. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look and see what this looks like and what we're talking about. The last time I got underneath here, I saw this and said, oh boy, let me take a look at this. So you can see, or maybe you can't because there's no light. Wow, you can't see. But this is what we're looking at right here. This bushing. Now, we'll talk more about what this bushing looks like when it comes out. I've already got a couple of new ones to put in, but let's go ahead and take this out and see what it looks like. So to do this, we know we're going to need a metric wrench, but we're not really sure which metric wrench. So we go with my favorite option here, which is it's probably bigger than a 13. It's maybe a 14 or a 15, but you know, sometimes it could be a 16 or a 17, so let's take all of them. Why not? And so the best part about working on cars is when you do the try every wrench method, you get to your biggest wrench, which we got the 17, and that doesn't work. Must be an 18. Let's try that. All right, so we're under here on the other side of the motorhome because I already did the one side. So we're getting on the other side now, and we actually have the correct 18mm wrench. So here we are looking up at the shock, and of course one side is really easy to do and the other side is just an awful pain. So you can't get a socket on top of the area up here, and that's really unfortunate. So while you're laying underneath, you gotta stick your right hand all the way up in here, and you can see the bottom of the wrench. You basically have to stick the wrench through the other side of the motorhome to be able to get a hand on it on top of the nut. We find out that on the bottom here, there's a place to hold the shock while you take the top nut off. So in this case, we got a 22mm, probably can't even barely see that. So you stick this in here, so you got some leverage on it, and the shock body doesn't start rotating. And once that's in there, this, come to find out, of course, it's not another 18 millimeter, it's a 19 millimeter. So now you got a 22 and a 19 and an 18, and this should take the shock off for you. All you gotta do is take that top nut off. I don't know if I can get in there to see it. You can just barely see it there. And then we can take this whole shock out, and then we'll go further. And guys, so we've got the shock out, and you know, it's kind of a mixed bag here. If we take a look at this top bushing, you know, an initial look, it doesn't look too bad, but on the top here, you can see that it's actually split. Now, it's not split all the way through, and it doesn't seem to affect the back, but if you look straight into this, you can kind of see that the hole is actually hogged out a little bit, and there's definitely some play in there. Is it going to affect the shock and the performance? Not really. This bushing still looks like it's all right. You know, if you get a chance to replace this over the course of the next year or so, I didn't order these. The only bushing I ordered was this one. As you can see, this is just a rubber bushing, and all we need to do is get it out. So there's lots of different ways we can do this. You can cut it out if you're really feeling sassy, or you can press it out. And all you need is something a little bit smaller than this so that you don't mess up this end collar to push it out. So that's the next thing we're gonna do. We're gonna push this out. All right, so we got the shock here. We're getting ready to press it out on this cheap press here. And the biggest thing you could be concerned with is this collar. If you're gonna press the bushing out through the center, you need to be able to support the outer collar. So you can use a socket. I typically find anything I can in my drawer that relatively fits approximately the right size. And all you have to do is make sure that you're supporting this outer. So when you're pressing through the inner, the bushing not only has somewhere to go, but you have to support this outer metal. Otherwise, you can bend this, you can break it. And if the bushing doesn't have anywhere to go on the inside of this socket, you can mess it up, and you can actually make the inner diameter bigger, and then the new bushing won't even fit in there or stay in there. So we've got the bushing out, and we can see inside the bushing. So we went ahead and got the bushing out, and you can see inside the eye of the shock, the bottom of the shock, that it's got a ridge in here, and that's for this bushing to sit in. And as long as we get it centered in there, it should be fine. And so the difference between the old bushing and the new bushing is, well, you can see the old bushing. It doesn't look particularly amazing on both sides. This side looks a little bit better, but still it looks a little hogged out. And this is what sits. The shock sits like this in the vehicle. So your bushing sits on here. And so every time you get a vertical movement of the shock, if it's got a little hogged out hole in there, the shock can move just a tiny amount without actually doing any damping. So it could create on some rough roads, might feel a little uneasy feeling as you're driving, lots of different things. It's not going to manifest itself in some kind of weird shake, maybe a tiny bit, but usually not so much. But anyway, we got this new bushing. We got to get back in the shock. We're going to go over to the press it back in. I'll show you guys how we're doing that in a second. I knew it wasn't done yet. Of course not. So the way this sits in the vehicle, you got a bottom bushing and you got a top bushing and you got the top plate. And in between this, the shock fits up into the vehicle, and then this sits on top of the chassis frame, and then the nut goes on the top. Well, I forgot about this top bushing, and as you can kind of see here, it's kind of cruddy. Now, is there anything really wrong with it? That's a good question. The actual firmness of the rubber on it does feel like it's maybe a little bit worn out. The hole, it definitely shows that it's had some wear, and that it's a little bit oblong instead of just round. And the inside of the bushing, I don't know if you can really see it, it's a little bit split. So, you know, this is 5 years old with almost 70,000 miles on it, and it could probably stand to be replaced. So I'll probably pull this back off again in a week or so after I get some new parts for this. So I'll go ahead and order the new bushings, and then it's going to be the same process. We take the shock out. We got a 18 millimeter for the bottom. We got a 19 mil for the top nut, and then a 22 to hold the shock while you're taking the top nut off. Other than that, it's a pretty simple procedure. So I'm going to throw this back in for now. Probably maybe just leave it out for now. But now, normally we would go out and test drive this, but it's Michigan in February, which means there's snow on the ground. You know, when it gets a little, if it gets warmer outside in the next couple of months, we'll take it out for a test drive, make sure everything's good. I don't anticipate anything. We didn't really do anything major. So we get a lot of other projects lined up for the rest of the winter. If there's anything that anybody would specifically like to see with maintenance on the motorhome or whatnot, drop me a comment and let me know. Maybe we can work it out.